Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with the news from the global economy. Coming up today, Iran's Rouhani increasingly loses public support, and Spain's nationalistic movements remain subdued. First, the headlines. Pfizer proposed buying AstraZeneca for nearly $100 billion and is still interested in a deal after the British pharma giant rejected the offer. The suggested buying price of $78.52 a share is 14% above AstraZeneca's closing price on Friday. Following Pfizer's confirmation of its interest in the UK's number 2 pharmaceutical company, AstraZeneca's shares surged 15%. If the acquisition takes place, it would be one of the largest takeovers in the industry's history and create the largest healthcare company by revenue. The US and European Union will impose new sanctions on Russian companies and individuals close to President Vladimir Putin as the crisis in Ukraine lingers. The sanctions will target people in Putin's inner circle and the companies they control. In addition, they will also designate high-technology exports to Russia's defense industry. US officials warned that broader sanctions that affect ordinary Russians, and not just the business oligarchs in Putin's inner circle, would backfire to Putin's benefit. And US President Barack Obama said the sanctions would be more effective if everybody signs on and everybody's committed. Serbia's next Prime Minister Aleksandar Vučić pledged to implement a difficult reform of the bloated public sector. Since 2000, governments have avoided any attempt to downsize the public sector, which employs nearly 800,000 people. The government will cut public sector salaries by 10%. It will also stop subsidizing 153 loss-making state-run firms that employ 60,000 people and absorb 750 million euros in government subsidies. Vučić plans to revise the budget by end of June to secure a new IMF loan deal that could cut Serbia's borrowing costs and reassure investors the government is committed to reform.
The growth of the economy in Serbia has been modest and weak in recent years, and was not all due to the consequences of the global economic crisis. Those who led our country behaved carelessly, spent money that we don't have, stole funds for themselves, employed more and more people in the public sector.
Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak agreed to upgrade bilateral relations with the U.S., but said Malaysia remains far from ready to sign a U.S.-led trade pact due to domestic sensitivities. President Barack Obama said the U.S. was willing to be flexible, but emphasized the trade deal is aimed to create higher standards for labor, environmental, and intellectual protection. The Trans-Pacific Partnership aims to eliminate trade barriers among a dozen Asia-Pacific economies, covering a third of all global trade and 2/5 of the world economy.
The trade agreement that we're trying to create, the TPP, part of what we're trying to do is to create higher standards for labor protection, higher standards for environmental protection, more consistent protection of intellectual property, because increasingly that's the next phase of wealth. All those things require more transparency and more accountability and more rule of law. And I think that it's entirely consistent with Malaysia moving into the next phase.
French President François Hollande and his economy minister on Monday met General Electric Chief Executive Jeff Immelt to discuss the future of French engineering group Alstom. The meeting follows intervention by the French government and German industry rival Siemens after last week's rumors of GE's $13 billion takeover of Alstom. French officials urged Alstom to consider a rival offer from Siemens that would create 2 European champions. The rumored deal would give GE control of Alstom's high-speed TGV trains and rail signal technology. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani was elected on hopes that he could revive the country's economy. But as the economic situation continues to wither, the public's goodwill towards him is fading fast. Daniel Roth has the story.
The honeymoon may be over between the Iranian President Hassan Rouhani and the Iranian people that elected him on hopes that he could revive the sanctions-rattled economy. Enacting a more moderate sensibility than his predecessor and embarking on a path of cautious contact with the West, Rouhani has started to slow inflation, which is currently down 5.7 percentage points from a year ago. But austerity measures are on the agenda, including major changes to state subsidy programs for fuels, electricity, and foods.
There are some people who have high earnings and subsidies do not matter to them. It has no impact on their lives. But subsidies have impacts on our lives. It should not be discontinued.
Despite the vast majority of Iranians signing up for state aid programs indicating a need for subsidies, the price of gas was hiked 75% last Friday. The country is in a state of stagflation, but there is optimism that a nuclear deal could be struck between Iran and the West, ending Iran's economic isolation and giving way to a more stable environment.
The situation will improve if we reach a nuclear agreement. The prices of goods will decrease and become steady. The prices won't skyrocket.
A deal is yet to be agreed upon, and Western business interests have warned of negative outcomes if there is no agreement by the end of the interim period in July. With most sanctions still in place and the current implementation of subsidy cuts, frustration is running high amongst Iranians looking for relief.
Joining us now is Dr. Elad Pardo, Iran expert and lecturer at Hebrew University. Dr. Pardo, thanks for joining us.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Well, yes, to you as well. So how effective have the sanctions been? I mean, to what extent can the sanctions really be blamed for the economic situation of Iran today?
Well, most economists would tell you, Iranian and not Iranian, that the major problems relate to the structure of the Islamic Republic of Iran, highly controlled by a variety of organizations that are connected to the supreme leader, Revolutionary Guards, others, and on top of that, a lot of corruption. Iran, if you take one of the major indexes, index of free economies,
yes,
Iran is down the list, not far away from South Korea and countries along this line. However,
yes,
the big major sanctions that led to this round of negotiations and to the election of Rouhani were a little bit too much even for Iran.
It basically increased pressure on an already feeble economy. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Iran is an extremely ideological country. They believe, and this goes on for decades now, that they are the country that is supposed to replace the United States as the world leader, and to bring a new political, ideological system that is, to a certain extent, democratic, but on the other hand, much more spiritual, based on Shiite tenets and other third world ideology. And because of that, they must be strong and grow as time goes by and spread across the world. Now, if they are blocked and if there is a danger of them imploding because of severe economic pressure, then they are susceptible to respond to pressure.
This leads to my next question, actually, which is how concerned is the Iranian regime about the economic realities on the street, about how the Iranians are oppressed by the situation, considering that they have this ideology?
Well, there is actually one person who is Khamenei, the supreme leader. He runs the show. He knows what's going on there, and he plays an extremely smart game between the so-called moderates, Rouhani and the like. And Rouhani, by the way, is a very close person to him, and the conservatives, Revolutionary Guards, and other religious people in Qom and many other groups. So he is not interested in a complete efflorescence, open markets in Iran, because this may lead to the collapse of the regime because of too much happiness.
Of course.
On the other hand, he doesn't want them to be really in a bad situation, because this may lead to an explosion or implosion of Iran.
Indeed.
So he plays along between these two alternatives. I would say that he would like to have sanctions going on for many years, but in a moderate rate.
In a way that they can actually continue to breathe. I have two questions related to what you just said. The first one is, just a couple of months ago, we saw an article from Reuters, I believe, that talked about how Khomeini, over a period of, I don't know, 10 years or more, had amassed tremendous amount of wealth through companies and houses and all kinds of capital that he just sort of usurped. Is this true?
Yeah, it is true. Actually, the first one after the 2009 elections, the famous film director Mohsen Makhmalbaf wrote a long article based, and he was one of the greatest revolutionaries,
right.
And he described the lifestyle of Khomeini. I mean, I wish it on everyone. He would take an airplane with his special horses and hundreds of Mercedes and all that. They really have the good life.
Dr. Pardo, thank you very much for your comments. Thanks for joining us. Despite Spain's economic crisis and a 26% unemployment rate, nationalistic movements remain a marginal force. Here's the report.
Food and basic needs. Here in Spain's Mediterranean city of Valencia, more than 150 poor families struggle to reach the end of each month. But at this patriotic social club supported by the far right, España 2000 party, families can get help, just so long as they're Spanish and have the ID card to prove it.
We have to help Spanish families first. When it comes down to it, they're the ones working and paying Social Security.
If we have to choose between an unemployed Spaniard and an unemployed immigrant family, the Spaniard comes first.
With unemployment at 26% and widespread corruption scandals, the Spanish extreme right would like to ride a wave of discontent, but it has a hard time winning over converts in a deeply Roman Catholic nation still marked by the Franco-era dictatorship.
The whole population had an immense thirst for what they called freedom, democracy, autonomy, etc. At the time, it was impossible for anyone who defended certain principles and traditions to recruit any members.
History aside, the few Spanish extremist parties that exist are also divided. Moreover, the ruling Popular Party has been able to absorb many voters on the far right, but that gives the movement influence at the heart of the party.
It occupies powerful positions. It lobbies to change public legislation, and it succeeds. And it makes the Popular Party slightly different to the average on the European right, more to the right.
So Spain could be the exception in a broader swing to the right in European elections next month, an exception that proves unemployment and austerity don't necessarily lead to extremist votes.
And now for a look into the stories behind the news in Media Watch with Daniel Roth. Daniel.
How's it going?
You're all green today.
I am.
Does this have anything to do with what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, we're going to continue on this Spain kick and talk about the Robin Hood of Spain.
Okay.
A man named Enrico Duran, who between 2006 and 2008 took out 68 commercial and personal loans from almost 40 banks in Spain.
Wow.
But under mostly fraudulent circumstances.
Yeah.
And the reason why he did this was to give this money out to social activists, people fighting capitalism in Spain, filmmakers, people speaking at universities, people who wanted to create art, things like this.
Were you one of the recipients, Daniel?
I was not one of the recipients, unfortunately, but that's the green shirt's just the beginning of my. I'm going through a grant writing process with.
I see. Okay.
to get some of these
now?
ones. So he's there. He's maybe going back to jail.
Okay.
This is the thing, but he's ready for it, it seems, and he's kind of unapologetic, and he says, "Look, the banks globally, not just in Spain, defrauded the people. So what he decided to do was kind of go out on a limb and figure out how to defraud the banks."
Is he a hero on the street?
He's a hero on the street. Calling him the Robin Hood of Spain is an understatement. People, actually not just in Spain, again, people around the world are talking about this guy as really a folk hero of sorts.
Tremendous act of self-sacrifice, essentially, because he's the one having to go to jail for it.
Right, and he actually was in jail briefly, and paid the 50,000 euro bail and got
From
out.
money that he got from one of the loans.
I'm not sure, but it would be funny if it entirely could be true.
Okay, we have another story here.
So actually, Krugman in the New York Times is writing about Piketty, who's getting picked on now, and there's not really any good arguments so far in this debate about capital in the 21st century and inheritance and kind of wealth flowing up. None of the right-wing economists have really dug out a good argument against him yet. And so Krugman's writing in the New York Times, he says, that the American Enterprise Institute is saying Mr. Piketty's work must be refuted because otherwise it will spread among the clerisy and reshape the political economic landscape on which all future policy battles will be waged.
So we might have to actually reconsider some of the theories that we've learned so far in terms of the economy, is it?
Right, and so what Krugman's really pulling out here is that what the success of capital in the 21st century has really called to question this idea of meritocracy.
I see. Okay, well, enough picking on Piketty. Thank you very much, Daniel Roth. That brings us to the end of this show. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares. Send us your comments and join us again tomorrow. That's it.